Because of time, I'll keep the questions to the panelists to just one or two questions in total. And most of what we will be doing will be result-oriented. It's quite tough when you put me after people like Abdul-Hakeem, Ajijola, and Tanwa. That was a very beautiful presentation, Tanwa. Interestingly, when I returned to Nigeria in 2014 or 2013, I met with Abdul-Hakeem, Ajijola, and he was the one who pointed me to direction on how to go about cybersecurity in Nigeria. So it's a pleasure to have you here once again. And I'll start with you, sir. Yes, and because you told us about a lot of stuff existing in the space, but what we have also learned is that there are a lot of silos in this industry. So the African Union has what it's doing. ECOWAS is doing what it's doing. There was the Paris call in 2017, where first of all, Trump had refused to sign, but the Biden administration has signed. And so about 80 countries and about 100 companies have signed and agreed to this. What are your thoughts on having one unified body, how there's the United Nations, how there's NATO, to oversee cybersecurity and cybersecurity corporations globally?
I'm a bit skeptical about it because I don't think that you can necessarily have a single direction. You have very large geopolitical differences around the world, so that you have, for example, the like-minded group, which tend to be the people in the so-called West. You tend to have people from, again, when I say East, I mean in terms of Russia and China. We also have maybe those of us who may be somehow what we would call non-aligned. And it is not that there is no central meeting point, but you can't really force sovereign nations in a particular direction. So even the UN processes, for example, have kind of been all over the place. And I'll give you an example. The current UN Secretary General started out with the high-level panel. And this was to do with cybersecurity. And this was chaired by Melinda Gates and Jack Ma. At the same time, this same person had the UN GGE process, Group of Governmental Experts. Now, this was a very narrow process. Only I think, 10 or so countries. And so a lot of people felt left out. And yet, this same UN Secretary General has now the open-ended working group. So my point is that the UN alone, and I've not started talking about ITU, the UN headquarters in New York alone has 3 different processes because of those internal politics. If you think the politics of PDP, APC is serious, go and see the politics in the UN. But if I may just add, I think also as we look at it, we have to understand that there is a difference between digital diplomacy and cyber diplomacy. Digital diplomacy is about the use of these tools to advance your own diplomatic activities. Whereas cyber diplomacy is more about dealing with the relationships between nation states in cyberspace. And this comes to the central takeaway for all of us here. Africa is in desperate need of a generation of cyber diplomats who can meaningfully engage in these discussions. And if I may take you to history, sorry, I'm coming to you. Take you to history. In 1884, there was the Berlin Conference. That Berlin Conference created Africa, the states. Why we have those splits. Why you have some Yorubas in Togo and some in Western Nigeria. But it also established the governance mechanisms. What is going on now, especially when you look at the UNGGE and the OEWG, they are creating norms for cyberspace. Norms are soft laws. By the time you look at examples from laws of the sea, laws of nuclear, laws of outer space, those norms become hard laws which you must obey or become a pariah nation. And the point is like 1884 Berlin Conference, we are not at the table. It's not about sending me. I'm not a diplomat. We need people who are diplomats in essence. It's not an IT problem. Anyway, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And in line with what you've said, a lot of international organizations are working in different bits on building cybersecurity capacity. So I spent the last year working with the World Bank on the cybersecurity capacity maturity model, which I find coincidentally quite similar to your paper. And the dimensions which were created in partnership with Oxford University included cybersecurity policy and strategy, cybersecurity culture and society, cybersecurity education, training and skill, then legal and regulatory frameworks, and the final one was standards, organizations, and technology. And so those were the 5 dimensions. And when you think about it, Nigeria has almost all of that. The level of adoption may not be as much, but like you rightly said, we do have the policies in place. But this brings us to the representative of the Office of National Security. Nigeria is constantly in the news. Just 2 days ago, I read an article of 20 Nigerians arrested in Ghana for cybercrime and similar activities. What's the position of the Office of the NSA and our legal framework when it comes to extradition and prosecuting cybercrimes internationally?
All right. Thank you very much. Nigeria has been party to various conventions and treaty, and about international cross-border cyber investigation. There's the Malabo Convention and the Budapest Convention. Although we've not ratified and assented to it, we're working on mechanisms to get extensions. We're having discussions with Penpraze a couple of weeks ago, so that the Office of the Attorney General is currently working on it, and the intent is for us to assent to it. But in the interim, there are already collaborations for cross-border investigations, arrests, and even prosecution. So we're into it already. It's just for us to ratify and adopt.
Okay, before we let you go, our Cybercrime Act of 2015, for those who are aware, it was passed hurriedly with about 30 other bills in 2014 before the 7th Assembly handed over. Now, there's a lot of ambiguity in some of those laws, and when you see compared to the times which we are in at the moment, are there any moves to update that?
Okay, yes, there are firm moves to review the Cybercrimes Act. The last Cybercrimes Advisory Council meeting, the 9th meeting, recommended that the act be reviewed. So a committee is being set up, and this time around we're taking quite a bit of time to ensure that the representation is robust, so that whatever review we come up with will be much more better than the initial act currently in use now. So yes, in the coming weeks, a review committee will be instituted, and I think we'll start the whole process of getting the bill passed into law. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll go to Andrew, who is West Africa's cyber lead for the British High Commission. From research, I find out that our Cybercrime Act is very much, a bit of it was taken from the Computer Misuse Act of the UK from 1980, which was one of the foremost and pioneers when it came to cyber laws, and also with the Association of Commissioners of Police guidelines, the Agbo guidelines. And so Nigeria has worked so hard in trying to adopt and create these laws. And even with our cybersecurity strategy and policy, which I'm glad we had the private sector and CISAN and people like Hakeem Ajijola work on, there is Section 10 of the policy speaks on child abuse, exploitation, and the likes, which is a big issue in the United Kingdom. We've seen on social media in Nigeria where you see circulation of child porn unknowingly without people understanding the consequences of what they are doing. We've also seen cases of sexual and child exploitation, and this is an issue which the UK doesn't take lightly. Putting that together with your work in West Africa, what's the level of cooperation and training between the British High Commission and the West African countries under your purview?
Okay, so taking the first issue, talking about child exploitation, online protection, it's obviously quite a cross-cutting thing. We're talking beyond cybercrime there, we're talking in the realms of organised crime and other activities. So I can't speak on behalf of the National Crime Agency, for example, who engage quite closely with Nigeria and across West Africa on those issues. But when it comes to cybercrime, when it comes to capacity, we're basically, our partnership with Nigeria is about offering Nigeria what it wants and we hope what it needs in terms of the cyber capacity building, be that through institutions, be that through consulting on legislation, on strategy, be that through helping across the realm when it comes to things like the economy and the like. We're not telling Nigeria what it needs, we're not telling Nigeria what it wants, we're trying to consult, we're trying to partner, we're trying to lean on the cyber sector that we've built, the maturity that we built in the UK. We don't claim to have all the answers, we don't claim to know everything, but we do have expertise to share. We do have mechanisms where we can partner and we can try and help in these things. So it's about supporting and partnering rather than saying adopt X and Y because this worked for us, because it doesn't necessarily work in Nigeria just because it works in the UK.
Okay, second question for you is Nigeria's, one of Nigeria's biggest resources is human capital, the young people, the experts who you see here. I studied computer forensics in the UK. Now, the UK has its Global Talents Visa where cybersecurity is one of the requirements, one of the categories for people. And so I'm sure a lot of people in this room will be trying to apply. However, are you doing anything to build capacity of West Africans for the continent to ensure that they understand they have a place here to contribute to the sector?
I mean, this is definitely something which we want to support. I think we're beyond brain drain. Like, you know, let's develop capacity so we can take, you know, the best and the biggest and the brightest. And in the UK, we welcome migration to support our sectors, but we also have identified a big deficiency in our own labour market of developing those skills that we need, and we invest in a lot of money and a lot of time in the UK to at the very start of that ecosystem to get those skills into our labour market. So we're not taking those skills from around the world. In Nigeria, it's an opportunity. There's an incredible well of talent out there. There's the ability to create that talent from the youth and for population growth and from as digital sort of literacy grows. And yeah, of course, we're here to support on that journey. Specific programmatic activity does not currently exist to deliver this, but this is 100% something which we're keen to support.
So I think this is a charge for you to add that to your programmatic areas. We also have joining us online, Moliehi Makumane. Sorry if I ruined your name, so sorry. She's a security and technology researcher under the UNIDR program. Media, can she hear us? Okay, so my question for you is, the World Economic Forum calls it the fourth industrial revolution, where we are moving from just handheld devices and tabletop devices to artificial intelligence, virtual reality, robotics. Google now has its artificial intelligence tool, which has now achieved the level of an 8-year-old's emotional intelligence. With your work in research, how prepared is Africa as a continent when it comes to cyber warfare and policies that accommodate the fourth industrial revolution?
Thanks for that. And if you can hear me, from my perspective and the research that we've been doing, cybercrime will always be ahead of government. The question that we should be asking ourselves are these of emerging threats. What happens gaps that government can address. And the list of emerging adults, and by definition will use that bad as much as not all good. And so the challenge here is to what are malicious purposes where they can be used, and then to identify who the actors are. If the actors are non-state actors, strategy should propose and villages, and if they are state actors, that's where we got the global governance is the UN and group to develop norms for responsible state behavior, national critical infrastructure, as well as to address issues related to so really, the processes are technology because technology will always evolve. So readiness should be identifying the malicious use as well as identifying the government use. And as long as African members I think that we can good progress based on the UN Institute of Statistics. A lot of African countries currently have some sort of cybersecurity training, even if it's not called a strategy, it is a kind of legislative policy that equips law enforcement, and similarly a lot more also improved I'll leave it there.
Okay, thank you very much. So from the little which we could I could get from that, it's important for governments and for us to identify emerging threats and also to identify whether they are state or non-state actors. But also this is where experts and policymakers need to be aware of these emerging threats to ensure that they are included in future and current policies, which in the event of litigation or prosecution, it is covered within the ambit of the law. Otherwise, from experience with lawyers, they would use technicalities and the absence of it in the legislation to thwart your cases. To our panelists, thank you very much for your time and your contribution. Thank you very much.